grand ballroom sparkled under hundreds of tiny lights, each one reflecting off the polished floors and crystal chandeliers. The room was filled with some of the wealthiest people in the city, each dressed in their finest clothes. The air smelled faintly of perfume and fresh flowers, and soft music played in the background as servers moved quietly among the crowd, offering drinks and small plates of food. Laughter and chatter echoed off the walls, but the main focus was the stage at the front, where a famous pianist was about to perform. In the midst of all this, a young waitress moved carefully through the crowd. She carried a tray of champagne glasses, balancing them with practiced skill. She wore a simple black uniform, and her hair was pulled back neatly. Most people barely noticed her, and she preferred it that way. She had learned long ago that in places like this, it was better to be quiet and efficient than to draw attention to herself. As she moved from table to table, she watched the guests, noting the way some whispered to each other and others laughed a little too loudly to show off their importance. It was a world that felt very far from her own life. She came from a small apartment, worked long hours and spent her evenings alone, practicing something that no one here knew about. At home, she had a piano, old and slightly out of tune, where she would sit for hours playing music that carried her away from the reality of her day. Tonight, however, she had no time to think about her piano at home. She had to keep the glasses steady, refill the trays, and make sure no one spilled anything on the expensive carpets. Despite the busyness, she kept her movements smooth and quiet. A smile here, a nod there, but mostly she remained invisible, a shadow moving across the polished floors. From the corner of the room, she could see the famous pianist preparing to begin. The man was well known, with hands that moved effortlessly over the keys and a reputation that made even seasoned musicians admire him. The audience seemed excited, leaning forward in their chairs, glasses in hand, ready for the music to start. Everyone wanted to see talent, but talent they expected to come from someone like him, not from a server quietly making her way through the crowd. She paused for a moment near the stage, setting down a tray carefully on a side table. Her heart beat a little faster as she listened to the soft tuning of the piano. There was something magical about the way the room seemed to hold its breath before the music began. She loved this feeling, even if she was only a spectator from the sidelines. As she looked around, she noticed how everyone seemed absorbed in the upcoming performance, talking about the pianist, the pieces he would play, the technique, and the emotion he could bring to the music. No one noticed her at all. No one even considered that someone in the crowd, or in the service staff, might have the ability to play at all. But she knew. She knew what it was like to sit at a piano and let the music flow through your fingers, the way it could make you feel lighter, as if all your problems had melted away for a few moments. The crowd began to quiet down as the pianist walked to the bench. Cameras clicked softly in the distance, capturing the moment. The young waitress took a deep breath and adjusted her tray in her hands. She moved slowly toward the tables again, offering glasses, answering polite questions about what drinks were available. Her movements were fluid, almost like a dance, trained by hours of experience in carrying trays and navigating crowded spaces. As she walked, she noticed small details. The way one man fiddled nervously with his cufflinks, the way a woman whispered something to her friend while glancing at her phone, the way the light caught the glass in such a way that it created tiny rainbows on the tablecloth. These small moments reminded her that the world of the elite was strange and fascinating, even if it was not the world she lived in. For a moment, she let herself imagine sitting at a grand piano in this very room, playing for this crowd, letting them hear music that came from her heart. She smiled slightly at the thought, quickly pushing it away. It was just a daydream, something to entertain herself while she worked. No one here would ever expect someone like her to have such skill, and she was okay with that. Her attention returned to her tray as she approached a table where a group of older guests were laughing. She refilled their glasses, nodding politely, and moved on before they could really notice her. She passed a couple standing near the edge of the room, their conversation low and serious. She paused just a little to watch the pianist begin to play. The first notes floated through the air, delicate and precise, and she felt a small thrill in her chest. This was why she loved music, the way it could change the energy of a room, make people feel something even without words. As the pianist's fingers danced across the keys, she moved to another table, delivering drinks and listening to the melodies that filled the room. She kept her back straight, her movements efficient, but she couldn't help feeling a small pang of longing. This music was beautiful, but she knew that if it were her hands on the keys, she could add something different, something personal that came from years of practice and quiet dedication. The pianist played several pieces, each one more complex than the last. The crowd clapped politely at the end of each, murmuring their admiration. She observed them quietly, noting how their applause was expected, almost rehearsed, a social formality more than genuine emotion. She wondered how it would feel to play for them and actually make them stop, make them really listen. Her tray was now empty, and she carefully set it down behind a column. She took a deep breath and allowed herself a moment to simply watch. The pianist was skilled, no doubt, but she thought about the hours she had spent alone at home, practicing in secret, learning techniques that no one would ever see. The idea that she might never have a chance to share that talent made her heart ache a little. Then, almost without realizing it, she found herself glancing toward the piano again, closer now, almost invitingly. The pianist finished a particularly difficult piece and leaned back, smiling at the applause. The crowd looked impressed, but she noticed the faint smirk on a few faces, the kind that said, "Well, that was expected." That little detail made her chest tighten slightly. If only they knew that someone else, someone unexpected, could play in a way that might truly surprise them. She took another step toward the stage, keeping her movements casual, careful not to draw attention. A small stumble from another server nearby almost made her drop a glass, but she caught it just in time, steadying herself. Her heart was beating faster now, partly from the narrow escape, partly from the growing excitement she felt in the air. There was a strange electricity in the room, a tension she could sense, as if something unexpected was about to happen, even if no one else realized it. As the pianist prepared for the next piece, she paused behind a row of chairs, just observing. She noticed the way the elite guests leaned forward slightly, eager to see what would come next, expecting brilliance, but brilliance from the usual source. No one noticed her. They never did. And yet, in her mind, she imagined what it would be like if she were the one to play, if her fingers could take over the room and make every eye turn toward her, even for a moment. For now, though, she stayed in the background, silent, unseen, carrying her tray and moving with quiet grace. But deep down, she felt a tiny spark of anticipation, a small thrill that maybe, just maybe, something could change tonight. And even if it didn't, she would always carry that feeling with her, the feeling of being close to something beautiful, something powerful, something that belonged to her alone. The music played on, and the young waitress, unnoticed by all, allowed herself a secret smile. As the pianist finished his latest piece, the room erupted in polite applause, glasses clinking and soft murmurs of appreciation filling the air. The elite crowd, fully accustomed to brilliance, nodded and whispered among themselves, impressed but not surprised. Some guests leaned back in their chairs, sipping champagne, waiting for the next performance. It was the same pattern every time. Admiration, polite applause, then anticipation for more music. Yet, for one young waitress standing at the edge of the room, a strange feeling was stirring. A mix of excitement, nervousness, and a tiny spark of opportunity. She carried her empty tray to the side, placing it carefully on a small table, and took a deep breath. She had been moving among the crowd all evening, quiet, efficient, and unnoticed. Now something felt different. There was a lightness in the air, a shift that made her heart beat a little faster. She didn't know why, but she felt a pull toward the piano. It was as if the music itself was calling her, whispering that tonight could be different. The pianist, noticing a moment of playful curiosity, smiled at the audience and said, almost jokingly, "Anyone here thinks they can try this piece? Don't be shy. If you can play, come forward." Laughter erupted from the crowd, some clapping their hands lightly in amusement. The idea of a guest or staff member stepping up seemed ridiculous, even funny. The elite audience leaned back, smirking, confident that no one would dare attempt such a challenge. Their attention, however, briefly shifted from the pianist to the empty space near the piano, where the invitation hung in the air. The waitress's hands tightened slightly around the tray she had been carrying. Her mind raced. Could she do it? She had practiced for years in secret, hours spent alone at her small piano at home, fingers learning melodies and harmonies that now flowed naturally through her mind. She had never played for anyone other than herself, and the thought of an audience this size made her stomach flutter nervously. But the excitement in the room, the gentle encouragement hidden behind polite laughter, made her feel a strange courage she had never felt before. She took a step forward, almost hesitating, then another. A few people in the audience noticed the movement and whispered to each other, curious at who the server might be. Their smiles were teasing, some even chuckling quietly. The pianist looked up, raising an eyebrow in mild surprise but saying nothing. The elite crowd thought this was a joke, an amusing interruption before the real performance continued. No one could imagine that this quiet waitress, unnoticed for the entire evening, might possess the skill to play at all. She approached the piano slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Each step felt heavier, each glance from the crowd more intimidating. She had been invisible all evening, moving carefully among expensive glasses and polished floors, and now all eyes were beginning to turn toward her. She reminded herself to breathe, to focus, and to let her fingers remember what she had learned in countless lonely hours of practice. This was just music. It was something she loved, something that lived inside her, and she had nothing to fear. As she reached the piano, she paused for a moment to adjust her posture and steady her hands. The pianist leaned back, watching intently, curiosity replacing his earlier amusement. The room fell unusually quiet, the audience sensing that something unexpected was about to happen. People whispered, some leaning forward in their chairs, eager to see what would unfold. A few of the servers nearby stopped their tasks, glancing toward her, sensing the unusual tension that had taken over the room. She lifted her fingers to the keys, hesitating for a brief second, then pressed them down. The first note rang clear, soft but confident. A few heads turned in surprise. The sound was delicate, almost hesitant, yet carried a clarity that caught the audience off guard. Whispers started again, softer this time, as people began to pay attention. They were no longer laughing. Something was changing. She continued, letting her hands find the melody naturally, her fingers dancing over the keys with a fluidity that came from years of practice. Each note carried emotion. Each chord resonated in the room in a way that made people sit straighter, lean closer, and hold their breath. The pianist's expression changed from mild amusement to genuine curiosity, then to awe, as he watched someone unknown play with such skill and confidence. The crowd's reaction shifted slowly. What had started as polite curiosity turned into quiet admiration. People whispered to each other, unsure of what they were witnessing. Some shook their heads in disbelief. The sound coming from the piano was unlike anything they expected from a waitress. The music was rich, precise, and deeply moving. Eyes widened, breaths caught, and even the most composed members of the audience felt a shiver run through them. As she played, she felt herself slipping into the music completely, losing all sense of the audience and the room. Her fingers moved instinctively, remembering every lesson learned in solitude, every piece she had practiced countless times. The music flowed through her naturally, effortlessly, carrying with it the passion and joy she had kept hidden for so long. In that moment, she was no longer a server, no longer just part of the background. She was the music itself, filling the room and commanding attention in a way that words never could. Some audience members began to whisper, trying to identify the performer. "Who is this?" one asked, eyes wide. Another shook their head, stunned. The pianist, now completely captivated, allowed a small, appreciative smile. He had seen talent before, but nothing like this. The room, usually filled with predictable reactions, was alive with genuine surprise and awe. People stopped sipping their drinks, stopped murmuring, and focused entirely on the piano and the unknown young woman creating such extraordinary music. She played several pieces, each flowing seamlessly into the next. The music carried emotion, technical mastery, and a sense of freedom that seemed almost impossible in such a formal setting. The crowd was mesmerized, caught between disbelief and admiration. A few guests even exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that they were witnessing something rare and extraordinary. The polished floors reflected not just the chandeliers, but the unspoken energy of astonishment and wonder filling the room. Her performance grew bolder with each piece, confidence blossoming as she realized the crowd was genuinely listening, not just observing politely. She played complex passages, her fingers moving with speed and precision, yet never losing the beauty of the melody. Each note had meaning, each pause was intentional. Even those who had doubted her in the beginning were now completely absorbed, their skepticism replaced by admiration and awe. The pianist leaned closer, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the piano, watching intently. He had performed for countless audiences, seen prodigies and virtuosos, but this was different. The raw talent, hidden in someone who had been invisible all evening, was something rare and breathtaking. He knew the elite crowd was feeling the same shock, their polished, composed appearances cracking as genuine emotion took over. As the last piece ended, she let her hands linger on the keys for a moment, letting the final note resonate in the room. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by the soft echo of the last chord. The audience blinked, uncertain at first how to respond. Then, slowly, applause began, polite at first, then growing louder, more sincere. Glasses clinked, chairs shifted, and a few people even stood, unable to contain their amazement. The elite crowd, used to performances that impressed but did not move them, was stunned beyond words. The young waitress rose from the piano, her face calm but her heart racing. She had done it. She had shared her secret world, her music, with people who had never expected anything from her. For the first time that night, she was seen, not as a server, not as a background presence, but as someone capable of extraordinary talent. The realization was both thrilling and humbling, and she allowed herself a small, private smile as the applause continued. Her journey from invisible to unforgettable beginning in a single, perfect moment. As the applause slowly died down, the room remained charged with a different kind of energy. The elite guests, used to polite displays and rehearsed reactions, were now caught between disbelief and admiration. Their eyes followed the young waitress as she stood beside the piano, a quiet confidence in her posture. She had expected attention, but not like this. Faces that had been indifferent just moments ago were now leaning forward, trying to understand who this person was and where such talent could have come from. The pianist, usually composed and confident, allowed himself a moment of astonishment. He had witnessed countless performances, trained and refined, but this was raw, real, and powerful. He stepped closer, curiosity sparkling in his eyes, as if he wanted to learn her secret. She returned a calm, polite nod, acknowledging his presence but keeping her focus on the audience. The moment was hers, and she felt it keenly. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. People leaned toward each other, murmuring in disbelief. "Did you see her hands?" one asked. "I thought she was just a server," another replied. Some shook their heads slowly, their expressions a mix of shock and admiration. The entire room, usually focused on maintaining appearances, had shifted. They were no longer simply observers. They were witnesses to something extraordinary, something that defied their expectations. A few guests who had been scrolling through their phones stopped abruptly, captivated by the lingering impact of the music. Others straightened in their seats, leaning on the polished tables, their glasses momentarily forgotten. Even those accustomed to luxury and privilege were caught off guard by the sudden emergence of talent in such an unexpected place. The young waitress's performance had broken the usual rhythm of the evening, leaving the crowd speechless, and now, she held their attention completely. Her fingers hovered near the keys, almost unconsciously. The music that had just flowed from her hands was still alive in the room, echoing softly in the polished corners. She could feel the energy of the audience, their curiosity, their awe, their quiet anticipation. The moment demanded something more, a continuation, a deeper connection. She leaned slightly forward, allowing her fingers to find the keys again. This time, she played with a gentleness that contrasted with the technical brilliance of her previous pieces. Every note seemed to carry a story, every chord a memory. The music became a language of emotion that everyone in the room could understand, even without knowing who she was. The crowd was captivated. Some guests held their breath, afraid to interrupt the delicate sound filling the room. A few closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, experiencing the emotion in its purest form. The pianist watched, his hands resting on the edge of the instrument, fascinated by the way someone so young and unnoticed could create such depth and feeling. He had expected skill, perhaps even polish, but what he was seeing now was something far rarer. Authentic artistry, coming from someone who had nothing to prove and everything to express. A small group of servers had stopped their work entirely, hiding near the sides, watching their colleague with wide eyes. They had known her as quiet, diligent, and reserved, but they had never imagined the talent she possessed. Some exchanged quick glances, whispering encouragement and astonishment. The realization that someone they had passed countless times without noticing could inspire such awe made them both proud and amazed. As the young waitress continued, she allowed her imagination to guide the music. Each note, each rise and fall of the melody, was intentional, yet free and spontaneous. Her hands moved fluidly, effortlessly transitioning between gentle passages and powerful crescendos. The room seemed to breathe with her, the grand chandeliers reflecting a soft glow as if celebrating the moment. The audience was no longer just watching. They were immersed, experiencing something rare and unforgettable. The pianist leaned in closer, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her technique. He could see the confidence in her touch, the subtle way her fingers curved over the keys, the precision of her timing. He recognized talent when he saw it, and he knew this was beyond mere practice. It was instinct, emotion, and dedication combined in perfect harmony. The elite crowd, sensing the change, began to murmur again. But this time, it was admiration mixed with awe. The air was thick with unspoken acknowledgement that something remarkable was happening. Some guests attempted to discreetly capture the moment on their phones, but they quickly realized that no picture or video could truly capture the emotion. It was alive in the room, between the notes, and in the reactions of those who were witnessing it firsthand. Eyes glistened, lips parted in surprise, and a few faces showed hints of tears. Even those who prided themselves on composure could not hide the impact of the performance. The young waitress felt a sense of liberation. She was no longer invisible, no longer confined to the background of someone else's event. She was present, seen, and appreciated for her talent. The music flowed effortlessly, and she let it carry her. She had spent countless hours practicing in solitude, dreaming of moments like this, but nothing could have prepared her for the intensity of being noticed, for the raw reaction of a room full of strangers suddenly aware of her existence and ability. As she played, her mind wandered briefly to her life outside this room. The quiet evenings at home, the small apartment, the hours spent learning and perfecting each piece alone. They all led to this moment. And yet, there was a strange clarity in realizing that the recognition she had longed for was not about wealth, status, or privilege. It was about connection, about sharing a piece of herself and witnessing the emotional response of others. That was far more powerful than applause or accolades. She ended the piece softly, letting the final note linger. The room was silent for a heartbeat, caught in the fragile space between sound and reaction. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started quietly, hesitant, as the elite crowd tried to process what they had just witnessed. Then it grew, rising in volume and sincerity, filling the grand ballroom with genuine appreciation. People stood, some clapping with intensity, others wiping tears from their eyes. The young waitress remained seated for a moment, absorbing the reaction, before finally standing, a humble smile on her face. The pianist, now fully engaged, approached her with a mix of respect and admiration. He offered a nod and a smile, acknowledging her skill without needing words. The audience, noticing the silent interaction, understood that this was no ordinary performance. Something extraordinary had occurred, and everyone present had been lucky enough to witness it. Guests who had doubted or underestimated her now looked at her differently. The energy in the room had shifted. People who had come expecting entertainment from someone famous were now inspired by the talent of someone they had assumed would remain unnoticed. Conversations sparked quietly, asking who she was, where she had learned, and how such skill could exist in someone so young and so humble. The young waitress allowed herself a small breath of relief. She had stepped into a space where no one had expected her to be, shared her talent, and changed the perception of those around her. The experience was exhilarating, humbling, and profoundly satisfying. It was a moment that would remain with her forever, a memory of courage, discovery, and the undeniable power of music. As the crowd continued to react, some guests quietly approached, offering words of admiration and curiosity. Others stayed back, still processing the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. The pianist remained nearby, observing her, perhaps already imagining the possibilities of what she could achieve if given further opportunities. The young waitress felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, her heart racing but her spirit soaring. She had taken a chance, faced the unknown, and emerged not just seen, but celebrated in a way she had never imagined. In the midst of the applause and whispers, she found a quiet moment to reflect. The evening had begun like any other, with her moving silently through the crowd, unnoticed and routine. Now, she stood at the center of attention, her talent undeniable, her presence impossible to ignore. The transformation was both thrilling and humbling. She knew that this night, this performance, would mark a turning point, a moment when her hidden skill and quiet dedication became impossible for the world to overlook. And so, as the final notes faded and the applause continued, the young waitress stood there, allowing herself to absorb the energy of the room, the astonishment and admiration of the elite crowd, and the deep, personal satisfaction of sharing her gift. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be truly seen, not for her role, not for her status, but for her talent, her passion, and the heart she had poured into every note. The applause continued to echo through the grand ballroom, filling the space with a warmth that was almost tangible. People who had come expecting a brief performance were now completely absorbed, their attention fixed entirely on the young waitress who had stepped up to the piano. Some guests whispered among themselves, struggling to find words to express what they had just witnessed. There was awe, disbelief, and a deep sense of admiration mingled together, creating an energy in the room that was almost electric. The pianist stepped back slightly, watching her with a mixture of respect and fascination. He had performed in front of crowds like this countless times, yet he had never seen a reaction like this, not even for the most celebrated musicians. He could see the precision in her technique, the emotion in every note, and the effortless grace with which she played. It was clear that her talent was real, profound, and undeniable. Guests began to stand, one by one, as if some unspoken signal told them that ordinary applause would not be enough. Their hands clapped harder, their voices rose in genuine cheers, and a few even whistled, unable to contain their astonishment. The room was no longer just polite. It was alive, moving with a rhythm that matched the passion of the music they had just heard. For many, it was the first time they had ever witnessed raw, unassuming talent come from someone they had overlooked entirely. Nearby servers, who had been quietly observing from the sides, exchanged amazed glances. They had known her as quiet and diligent, someone who moved efficiently through the crowded floors, carrying trays and refilling glasses without ever drawing attention. They had seen her as part of the background, invisible and unremarkable in the eyes of the elite. Now, they were realizing that she carried within her a brilliance that had gone unnoticed for too long. Pride and wonder mingled on their faces as they watched her, understanding that the world had just witnessed something extraordinary. The young waitress, standing by the piano, felt a strange mixture of relief and exhilaration. Her heart was still racing, but a calm confidence had settled over her. She had taken a chance, stepped into the spotlight, and shared her music with the world. For the first time, she felt truly recognized, not as a server or an observer, but as an artist capable of moving people with her gift. Her eyes scanned the audience, noticing faces filled with surprise, admiration, and even awe. Each look reinforced the truth she had always known. Her talent was real, and it deserved to be seen. The pianist finally approached her, a respectful nod on his face. He extended his hand and spoke quietly, his voice carrying genuine admiration. "That was incredible. Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. The question was sincere, not the polite curiosity one might expect in such a setting. The audience, noticing the interaction, leaned forward, eager to hear her answer. Whispers rippled through the room, people straining to catch a glimpse of her reaction. She smiled softly, a mixture of humility and pride in her expression. "I've been practicing for years," she said simply. "Mostly at home in my spare time. It's something I love." Her voice was quiet but clear, carrying a sense of honesty that touched the hearts of those listening. The audience murmured in appreciation, understanding that this was not just talent. It was passion, dedication, and a love for music that had been nurtured quietly, away from the spotlight. A few guests moved closer, asking questions about her background and experiences. They wanted to know how someone so young and unassuming could possess such skill. She answered politely, sharing small details without exaggeration, keeping the focus on the music rather than herself. Her humility only made the crowd respect her more. They could sense that this was genuine talent, untainted by ego or showmanship, and that made the experience all the more remarkable. The pianist gestured toward the piano, encouraging her to play again. Without hesitation, she sat down, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. This time, the music that flowed was even more expressive, filled with confidence and a sense of freedom. She played not just for the audience, but for herself, allowing every note to carry her emotions, her dedication, and the joy she felt in creating something beautiful. The crowd was mesmerized, leaning forward, captivated by the depth and richness of her performance. Some guests were moved to tears, unable to hide their emotional response. Others sat in stunned silence, absorbing the skill and passion in every chord. Even the most composed individuals, those accustomed to luxury and privilege, were visibly affected. The music spoke to them in a way that words could not, bypassing social barriers and reaching something deeper within. It was a reminder that true talent and emotion could come from the most unexpected places, and that brilliance was not reserved for those in positions of power or prestige. As she played, the energy in the room shifted. The elite crowd, who had arrived expecting to witness a routine performance, was now fully engaged, united by the shared experience of witnessing extraordinary skill. Conversations ceased, phones were forgotten, and all eyes were on her. The young waitress had transformed the atmosphere, turning a formal, predictable event into a moment of genuine human connection. The audience could feel her passion, her dedication, and her love for music, and it resonated deeply within each person. When the final note lingered in the air, there was a pause, a collective intake of breath as the room processed the magnitude of what had just happened. Then, slowly, the applause began, building in intensity and volume until it filled the grand ballroom. People stood, clapped, cheered, and some even whistled, their reactions spontaneous and sincere. The elite crowd, accustomed to polite admiration, was now expressing pure, heartfelt appreciation. The young waitress had not only played music, she had moved people, touched their hearts, and earned their respect. The pianist nodded again, this time with visible emotion. He extended his hand, acknowledging her skill and the impact of her performance. The audience, seeing this gesture, understood that this was a rare moment, something beyond the ordinary. They approached her cautiously, some offering compliments, others expressing amazement, all united in recognition of her talent. The young waitress received their words with grace and humility, her quiet smile reflecting both pride and gratitude. Nearby servers whispered among themselves, exchanging looks of disbelief and admiration. They had witnessed her transformation from invisible worker to center of attention, from background presence to the focus of the room. They realized that they had been part of something extraordinary, a story that would be remembered long after the evening ended. Their pride in her was evident, and they could see that her moment had changed not just her life, but also the perception of those around her. The young waitress took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of the moment. She had stepped into the spotlight, shared her talent, and left an impression on everyone present. The applause continued, mingling with whispers of admiration and awe. She had accomplished something remarkable not just in playing the piano, but in connecting with people on a human level. The experience was exhilarating, humbling, and unforgettable. As the crowd slowly began to settle, conversations resumed, but the energy in the room had shifted permanently. The elite guests, once composed and reserved, were now inspired, reminded that true talent and passion could appear in the most unexpected places. They would remember this evening, not just for the music, but for the story of someone who had quietly practiced, worked diligently, and then stepped forward to astonish them all. The young waitress stood beside the piano, allowing herself a quiet moment of reflection. She had faced the unknown, embraced her fear, and shared her gift with the world. The experience had transformed her, giving her a sense of confidence and validation that she had never known. More importantly, it had shown her that talent and dedication could not be ignored, that the courage to step forward could change perceptions and touch lives in ways she had never imagined. The pianist finally returned to the center of the stage, acknowledging her contribution and the impact it had on the audience. He smiled, a gesture of respect and recognition, and the crowd responded with renewed applause. The young waitress felt a sense of fulfillment and joy, knowing that her music had reached hearts, inspired admiration, and created a lasting memory for everyone in the room. In that moment, she understood the true power of her talent, and the profound effect one person could have when they dared to step into the spotlight. As the last echoes of applause faded, the young waitress remained at the piano, her hands resting gently on the keys. The room was alive with admiration, the energy charged by the unexpected display of talent. Guests continued to whisper among themselves, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. People who had doubted her from the start now looked at her with awe, trying to grasp how someone so quiet and unassuming could have such incredible skill. The pianist stepped forward, offering a hand and a warm smile. His eyes conveyed respect and genuine fascination. "You have something truly special," he said softly. "Have you ever considered performing professionally?" The question was sincere, free of any pretense or patronizing tone. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. Every guest, even those who had not been paying attention before, was now focused on this interaction. She shook her head slightly, a humble smile on her face. "I never thought anyone would notice," she replied. "I've always just played for myself." Her voice was quiet, but firm, carrying a sincerity that resonated with everyone present. The audience murmured, some nodding in understanding, others leaning forward as if drawn into the story behind her words. It was one thing to witness talent, and another to feel the humility and passion behind it. A few members of the elite crowd approached cautiously, introducing themselves and offering words of admiration. Their voices were respectful, tinged with curiosity and awe. They asked about her training, her experiences, and the journey that had led her to this moment. She answered simply, keeping her focus on the music and her love for it rather than any desire for recognition. Her honesty only amplified the crowd's appreciation, creating a connection that went beyond the formal setting of the ballroom. The pianist gestured toward the piano once more, inviting her to play another piece. She hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the attention, but then settled into her seat, allowing her fingers to find the keys. This time, the music was even more expressive, filled with a sense of freedom and joy. The audience was captivated, their eyes following every movement, their expressions reflecting astonishment and admiration. They were no longer simply witnessing a performance. They were experiencing the depth of her talent, the emotion behind every note, and the story that had brought her to this point. As she played, the room seemed to transform. The chandeliers shimmered with a warmth that matched the intensity of the music, the polished floors reflecting the energy in the air. Guests leaned closer, some closing their eyes, others moving instinctively to be nearer to the source of this unexpected brilliance. The young waitress, once invisible and unnoticed, was now the center of attention, her music weaving a connection that transcended social status and expectations. Conversations stopped, and the polite chatter of the elite crowd was replaced by silent admiration. The music spoke to everyone in the room, breaking through layers of privilege and pretense. Some guests were visibly moved, their faces softened, eyes glistening with emotion. Others were caught in awe, unable to tear themselves away from the piano. It was a rare moment of shared humanity, where talent and passion bridged the gap between different worlds. After finishing the piece, she allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, her hands resting on the keys as the applause surged once again. The crowd was no longer just impressed. They were inspired, motivated by the courage and skill displayed before them. Some whispered about potential opportunities, others speculated on how her talent could change her life. Even the most reserved individuals were openly expressing admiration, acknowledging that they had been witness to something extraordinary. The pianist stepped closer again, nodding in approval. "You have the ability to touch people's hearts in a way that few can," he said. "Have you ever thought about performing on a larger stage, sharing your music with more people?" The young waitress shook her head, smiling softly. "I've only ever played for myself. I never imagined anyone would care." Her words carried humility, but also a quiet strength that resonated with everyone listening. Several guests, including some influential figures, approached her with offers and encouragement. Invitations to perform at private events, connections to music teachers and mentors, and even suggestions for professional opportunities began to surface. Each offer was presented respectfully, without pressure, and with genuine admiration for her skill. She listened carefully, expressing gratitude, but remained composed, taking in the reality that her life was on the verge of change. The possibilities were overwhelming, but exciting, a testament to the courage it had taken to step forward and share her music. The room buzzed with excitement as word spread among the guests. Conversations shifted to her talent, her story, and the unexpected way she had captured everyone's attention. People who had been indifferent or distracted moments ago were now fully engaged, discussing the impact of her performance and the rare beauty of her skill. The young waitress observed the transformation, realizing that she had not only impressed the crowd, but had also inspired them, breaking through preconceived notions and expectations. Her colleagues, who had watched from the sidelines, were amazed. They had known her as quiet, diligent, and unobtrusive, someone who worked hard without drawing attention. Seeing her in this new light, they felt pride, awe, and a sense of shared joy. Her courage had opened a door, not only for herself but also for those who had witnessed her journey. They exchanged glances, understanding that they had been part of a rare, unforgettable moment. The young waitress felt a mix of emotions: excitement, gratitude, and humility. She had shared a part of herself that few had ever seen, and the response was beyond anything she had imagined. The experience reinforced the value of dedication, the power of passion, and the importance of seizing opportunities when they presented themselves. Her heart swelled with pride, not from recognition or fame, but from the knowledge that her music had touched others, creating a genuine connection that transcended status or wealth. As she stood beside the piano, receiving congratulations and encouragement, she reflected on the journey that had led her here. The countless hours of practice, the quiet evenings spent alone with her music, and the small sacrifices she had made to pursue her passion. All of it had prepared her for this moment. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the courage to step forward, to take a chance, that had truly changed the course of her evening, and perhaps her life. The pianist returned to the center of the stage, gesturing toward her and the piano. The audience responded with renewed applause, their energy focused on celebrating both her skill and the shared experience of witnessing something extraordinary. The young waitress, for the first time, felt fully seen and appreciated for her talent, her dedication, and the passion she had carried silently for so long. In the midst of the celebration, she allowed herself a quiet smile. She had taken a risk, stepped into the unknown, and shared her gift with a world that had never expected it. The result was beyond anything she could have imagined. Recognition, respect, and the beginning of opportunities that could change her life forever. The room, once filled with polite admiration and cautious curiosity, was now united in appreciation, inspired by her courage and the undeniable brilliance of her performance. As the evening continued, conversations about her talent spread, reaching corners of the room that had previously been disengaged. Guests shared their impressions, discussed the impact of her music, and speculated about the possibilities for her future. The young waitress, now at the center of attention, felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond the applause. She had connected with people on a human level, shared her passion authentically, and created a lasting impression that would be remembered long after the event ended. The experience was transformative. For the first time, she understood the power of talent combined with courage, the way one person could break expectations and touch lives through dedication and authenticity. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only for the recognition she had received, but also for the opportunity to share her music with those who had listened, witnessed, and responded with genuine emotion. The night marked a turning point, a moment where her quiet dedication had been acknowledged, celebrated, and validated in a way that would shape her future. And so, as the applause echoed and the guests continued to discuss and admire her performance, the young waitress stood by the piano, absorbing the energy, the admiration, and the possibilities. She had taken a chance, shared her gift, and transformed the perception of everyone in the room. Her life, once routine and predictable, had shifted in a single, extraordinary evening. The journey was just beginning, and she was ready to embrace whatever opportunities lay ahead, confident in her talent, her passion, and the courage that had brought her to this unforgettable moment. The room continued to hum with energy, even as the formal applause faded into quiet conversation. Guests lingered near the piano, discussing the young waitress's performance in hushed tones, each voice carrying disbelief, admiration, and curiosity. She stood beside the grand instrument, her hands lightly resting on the keys, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. For the first time, she realized that something she had always considered private, her secret love for the piano, had now transformed into an experience that touched countless people. People approached her carefully, offering words of encouragement and admiration. Some were influential figures in the world of music, others prominent members of the elite crowd, but all shared the same sentiment: astonishment at what they had just witnessed. One older gentleman, with a kind smile, extended his hand. "You have something truly remarkable. The world deserves to hear you play." She nodded quietly, humbled, yet inside she felt a spark of hope she had never felt before. It was as if the music she had shared had opened doors she never imagined existed. The pianist who had started the evening's performance returned to her side, this time speaking more freely. "I've never seen anyone play with such depth and emotion, especially someone who was never formally trained in the spotlight. Your gift is extraordinary. You should consider sharing it more often." His words were genuine, without exaggeration or flattery, and they filled her with both excitement and responsibility. She had been content playing for herself, but now she realized that her talent had the power to inspire, to move people, and to change her own life. A few influential guests quietly discussed the possibility of connecting her with mentors, music teachers, and opportunities to perform publicly. Invitations to private events and concerts began to surface, each one more surprising than the last. The young waitress, though overwhelmed, received each suggestion with grace, her calm demeanor reflecting the humility that had always been part of her character. Inside, however, a sense of exhilaration built steadily. The world she had always observed from the background was suddenly within reach, and the idea of stepping into it both thrilled and frightened her. Her colleagues, who had watched from the sidelines, were equally amazed. They had known her as quiet, dependable, and diligent, yet they had never imagined the extraordinary talent she held within. Some whispered to each other, exchanging astonished looks, while others approached her with smiles of pride and admiration. They had witnessed her transformation from background presence to center of attention, from unnoticed server to celebrated musician, and it left a lasting impression on everyone present. As she stood there, allowing the crowd to acknowledge her talent, she thought back to the countless hours spent at home, practicing alone in the quiet of her small apartment. The time spent learning each melody, refining each chord, and discovering the depth of her own abilities had prepared her for this moment. Yet, even with all that preparation, nothing could have truly prepared her for the overwhelming response she had received. The recognition was both humbling and empowering, a reminder of the value of dedication and perseverance. A few guests gathered near the piano, asking if she would perform again. She smiled softly, agreeing, and took her seat once more. Her fingers rested lightly on the keys, and then she began to play. This time, the music was infused with both confidence and joy. Every note carried a sense of freedom. Every chord reflected the emotion that had been building inside her throughout the evening. The crowd was captivated once again, drawn into the depth of her performance, and completely mesmerized by the passion she conveyed. The atmosphere in the room was electric. People leaned forward, some closing their eyes to better absorb the music, others nodding in appreciation. Even the most composed guests, who were accustomed to maintaining a polished demeanor, were visibly moved. The young waitress's music had broken through barriers of status and expectation, creating a shared experience that was both intimate and powerful. It was a moment of genuine connection, where the formalities of the evening melted away and only the music remained. As the final notes of her performance resonated through the room, there was a brief silence, as if everyone collectively held their breath, reluctant to let go of the moment. Then, slowly, the applause began, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each passing second. People stood, clapping, cheering, and even whistling, their admiration both spontaneous and heartfelt. The young waitress, now fully aware of the impact she had made, allowed herself a small, private smile. She had shared a piece of herself, and the response was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The pianist returned, this time with a broad smile. He offered a nod of respect, acknowledging her skill and the extraordinary impression she had left on the audience. The crowd, sensing the significance of the interaction, responded with renewed applause, celebrating not only her talent, but also the courage it had taken to step forward. The young waitress felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music had reached people's hearts, inspired admiration, and created a lasting memory for everyone present. Throughout the evening, invitations continued to pour in. Guests offered opportunities to perform at prestigious events, suggested mentors who could help refine her skills, and expressed a desire to support her growth in any way possible. She listened attentively, grateful for every offer, but also grounded in her humility. She understood that this was just the beginning, a door that had opened because she had dared to step forward and share her gift with the world. Her colleagues continued to watch in amazement, their admiration unwavering. They had seen her transform from a quiet, diligent worker into someone who commanded attention, respect, and admiration. The pride they felt was evident, and it was accompanied by a recognition of the extraordinary journey that had led to this moment. They whispered to each other about the power of talent, the importance of courage, and the way one person's dedication could inspire an entire room. The young waitress took a quiet moment to herself, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the long hours spent practicing alone, the quiet moments of doubt, and the persistent love for her craft that had kept her going. All of it had led to this moment of recognition, validation, and possibility. She realized that her life had changed, not only because of the attention she had received, but also because she had finally embraced the courage to share her talent with the world. As the evening drew to a close, she remained at the piano, surrounded by applause, admiration, and offers of support. The experience had transformed her perspective, giving her a sense of confidence and purpose she had never known. She had stepped into the spotlight, faced the unknown, and emerged not only seen but celebrated. The impact of her performance would resonate long after the event, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed it. The young waitress understood that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. She had discovered the power of her own talent, the importance of courage, and the joy of sharing her passion with others. The opportunities before her were endless, and she felt ready to embrace them fully. The evening had been a turning point, a moment where dedication, humility, and courage had converged to create something unforgettable. As she finally rose from the piano and took a last look around the room, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to share her music, for the recognition she had received, and for the people who had been inspired by her performance. She knew that her life would never be the same, and she welcomed the change with an open heart. The experience had shown her that talent, when combined with courage, could not be ignored, and that the act of stepping forward could change everything. And so, as the elite crowd slowly began to depart, still talking about the remarkable performance they had witnessed, the young waitress stood by the piano, her heart full, her spirit uplifted, and her future bright. She had transformed the evening, captured the hearts of the audience, and set in motion a journey that would take her far beyond the walls of the grand ballroom. The night had begun as any other, but it ended as the first chapter of an extraordinary story, one that would continue to unfold with each note she played and every opportunity she embraced. In that moment, she understood that the courage to share her gift had unlocked a world of possibility, and she was ready to step fully into it.